On a cold morning in South City, a disabled veteran boarded his usual bus, but this ride would be anything but routine. When a cruel driver humiliated him, everyone stayed silent, except one man. What no one knew, that stranger had a past and a plan. What began as a small act of defiance became a spark that ignited an entire city. This isn't just a story about standing up. It's about what dignity truly means. This is where silence ends. The bus screeched to a stop on the cracked pavement of Fifth and Alder. Morning fog still hovered in the air, like smoke clinging to the ground. The city was barely awake, except for Barry Rourke. Barry, in his late 50s, had driven Route 17 for over a decade, and it showed. His shoulders were hunched from years behind the wheel. His eyes always half-lidded with irritation. Every sigh from a passenger, every late fare, every slight delay was in his mind a personal insult. He tugged the lever, swinging open the bus doors. A handful of tired faces stepped aboard. Nurses finishing the night shift, construction workers heading downtown, and sleepy college students with earbuds and half-zipped hoodies. Barry barely acknowledged them. Then came the moment that always ticked him off. A soft tap of a cane, slow steps, a pause at the bottom of the stairs. Barry's jaw clenched as Marcus Bell stepped onto the bus. Marcus was in his mid-50s, lean but steady, his right pant leg folded neatly above a prosthetic, his left hand gripping a black cane worn smooth with use. He moved with careful dignity, his breath visible in the cold. "You're slowing everyone down again," Barry barked. "Come on. It's not a parade." Marcus didn't respond. He kept his eyes down, face neutral, and climbed the steps one by one. From the back of the bus, a sharply dressed man watched the interaction closely. He was maybe late 30s, clean-shaven, his coat crisp and dark. He didn't speak. Not yet. When Marcus reached the payment scanner, Barry muttered under his breath, just loud enough. "Some people just need to stay home where they belong." No one said a word. Marcus scanned his transit card. It beeped. He nodded once, a silent thanks to no one, and slowly made his way down the aisle. He passed the man in the coat, who looked up and nodded at him. Marcus gave a faint nod back. It was the first human kindness he'd received that morning. Barry slammed the bus into drive, jerking it forward before Marcus had even fully sat down. The veteran stumbled, catching himself awkwardly on a pole, then eased into the side-facing seat reserved for the elderly and disabled. He exhaled quietly and stared out the window. The road wound its usual path, through worn-out neighborhoods, shuttered laundromats, faded murals, gas stations with flickering signs. Inside, the mood was subdued. A young woman near the front, maybe 25, glanced at Marcus with unease. She looked like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. The man in the back continued to observe, fingers tapping idly on his briefcase. No phone. No newspaper, just watching. When they hit the light at Monroe Avenue, Barry glanced in the rearview mirror, his eyes narrowed. "You think this is a charity ride, Bell?" he said, voice loud enough to echo across the cabin. "I got a schedule to keep." Marcus didn't flinch. "I'm moving as quick as I can, sir." "Sir," Barry scoffed. "I was in the Navy 20 years ago. You don't call me sir." A ripple of discomfort passed through the bus. A man coughed. Someone near the back shifted in their seat. Still, no one spoke. Barry smirked, satisfied with the silence. Marcus turned back to the window. At the next stop, the young woman with the uneasy gaze exited. As she passed Marcus, she hesitated. "Thank you for your service," she said quietly. Marcus nodded but said nothing. When the doors shut again, the man in the coat leaned forward slightly, just enough for Barry to see him in the rearview. Barry looked back at him for a beat. "Something you want to see?" The man shook his head once. "Not yet," he said. The next few blocks rolled by in tense quiet. What none of them knew, not Barry, not Marcus, not even the silent passengers, was that this ride was different. That man in the back wasn't just a commuter. He was there for a reason. And today, Barry Rourke's decade-long reign of cruelty was about to hit a turn he never saw coming. Barry Rourke had always known how to push people just far enough to avoid getting in real trouble. He wasn't the type to raise his voice in outright rage or throw fists. No. His cruelty came with a smirk, a muttered jab, a sudden break that sent someone stumbling. He'd made an art out of riding the line. And for years, no one challenged him. Especially not the vulnerable ones. Especially not people like Marcus. It started months ago, maybe longer. Marcus Bell, a decorated Army veteran, had moved back to the city after losing his leg in an IED blast overseas. The government had covered the basics. A modest apartment, a prosthetic limb, but the emotional wounds, the sense of being left behind, that was his to carry. He tried to stay active, tried to find meaning, taking free community college classes a few stops away, and every morning, rain or shine, he took bus route 17. Barry noticed him right away. He didn't like the way Marcus moved too slow, didn't like the way he never complained, too quiet, didn't like the thank yous, the silent dignity. Something about that rubbed Barry the wrong way. So the remarks began. You need a gold medal for slowest entrance. Bet you get up faster when it's Veterans Day discounts. Take your sweet time, hero. We'll all wait. Every day little barbs thrown like knives, and every day Marcus bit his tongue and bore it. That's what soldiers did. They endured. What hurt even more wasn't Barry's words. It was the silence that followed. Nobody stood up for him. Most mornings, the same passengers rode the road. They heard the taunts, saw the looks. Some looked away. Some put in headphones. A few exchanged glances but said nothing. Once, a college kid chuckled nervously when Barry joked that Marcus should crawl if walking's too hard. Another time, a middle-aged man grumbled, "Just let the driver do his job," when Marcus tried to explain his limp delay getting off the bus. People weren't cruel, they were scared, or indifferent, or tired. Barry's reign wasn't just tolerated, it was normalized. And Marcus, he carried it all. Until that one morning. 2 weeks ago, Barry slammed the brakes just as Marcus was walking down the aisle. It wasn't an accident. It never was. Marcus fell hard against a metal pole, dropping his cane. His prosthetic twisted awkwardly beneath him. No one helped. Barry muttered, "You fall down more than you walk. Maybe stay off buses, huh?" Marcus got up without a word. His lip was bleeding. The man in the coat had been there that day too. He hadn't spoken, but he saw everything. And after the bus emptied, he stayed behind, quietly watching Barry, measuring him. That's when Barry noticed something was off. The man didn't just ride once. He started appearing daily. Always in the back. Always early. Always silent. He never caused a scene. Never made a sound. But his presence was unsettling. He didn't look away. Barry began to feel it. Something had shifted back in Marcus's apartment. The scars weren't just physical. His left shoulder ached where he'd taken the fall, but deeper than that was the silence. He hated how used to it he'd become. But deeper than that was the silence. He hated how used to it he'd become, how numb. He'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan. He'd held wounded brothers in his arms, but somehow this, being humiliated quietly in front of a bus full of strangers, felt harder. His VA Tervate had once said, sometimes it's not the war that breaks you, it's the way the world moves on, and pretends you were never in one. Marcus believed that now more than ever. But things were about to change. Because the man in the coat, he hadn't come alone. The silence on the bus was loud. After the driver barked his insult, the passengers remained still, some looking out the window, others shifting uncomfortably. No one spoke. No one challenged the injustice. For Marcus, the sting of the words was sharp, but not unfamiliar. He'd heard worse. He had survived worse. Still, he clenched his fists, knuckles white around the cane he leaned on. Then, from the back of the bus, a quiet voice cut through the stillness. "Excuse me," the man said, rising slowly from his seat. He was tall, lean, dressed in a charcoal gray coat and worn boots. His eyes were calm, steady, and oddly familiar. "Sir, I think you owe that man an apology." The bus driver scoffed. "You got something to say, pal?" The man didn't raise his voice. He simply walked forward, steady and deliberate. stopping beside Marcus. "What I have," he said calmly, "is a very good reason to stand up right now. Because the man you just disrespected once carried a friend of mine out of enemy fire. A friend who wouldn't be alive today if it weren't for him." The driver blinked, confused. "What are you even talking about?" "I'm talking about Staff Sergeant Marcus Cole," the stranger said clearly, turning so the rest of the passengers could hear. "Bronze Star recipient. Iraq War veteran. The man you mocked for needing a seat, saved lives so you could have the freedom to drive this bus without fear." A murmur swept through the passengers. Heads turned. Phones slowly began to rise, recording. Something in the room had shifted. Marcus looked up sharply. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low. The man gave a soft smile. "You wouldn't remember me, Sergeant. But I remember you. My brother's name is David. David Morales. You pulled him out of a Humvee after it took a direct hit in Fallujah." Marcus blinked. That name, it did sound familiar. He searched the man's face. He had shrapnel in his leg, screamed the whole way. "You were the kid crying in the medevac." The man nodded. "Yeah, that was me." The entire bus seemed to hold its breath. The bus driver's face had gone pale. "After that day," Morales continued, "David promised he'd never let your name be forgotten. He said you didn't just save his life, you gave him back his future." He turned now to face the driver again. "So when I see someone like you disrespecting a man like this, I don't stay quiet." I didn't know," the driver stammered. "I mean, I didn't know who he was." Morales shook his head. "That's the point. You don't get to treat people with dignity only when you know their story. That's not how respect works." The silence was broken by soft clapping. First from a woman near the front, then another near the back. In seconds the applause spread like wildfire. The bus, moments ago heavy with tension, now surged with something else. Reverence, shame, respect. The driver's shoulders slumped. He looked at Marcus, who hadn't moved. "I'm sorry," the driver said quietly. "I didn't mean." Marcus raised a hand, stopping him. "Don't apologize to me because I'm a vet. Apologize because I'm a human being. That should have been enough." The driver nodded, his face reddening. "You're right," he muttered. As the bus resumed its journey, something had shifted. The quiet was still there, but now it felt different, thoughtful, almost reverent. Marcus looked over at Morales. "You didn't have to do that." Morales shrugged. "Maybe not, but you saved my brother." "That's not something I forget." For the first time that day, Marcus smiled. From that moment forward, the passengers saw him differently, not just as a man with a cane, but as someone who had carried a weight far greater and was still standing tall. When the bus pulled up to the final stop, the usual shuffle of feet and slamming doors didn't happen. People lingered. Marcus stepped off slowly, nodding to Morales, who followed a few paces behind. The bus driver didn't say a word, but this time, he didn't look away either. He simply sat in his seat, quiet, reflective, ashamed. Outside, the cold air bit at Marcus's cheeks. He adjusted his coat and began his usual slow walk toward the Veterans Housing Center down the street. Behind him, Morales called out, "Hey, you mind if I walk with you?" Marcus hesitated, then gave a small nod. "You came all this way. Guess you earned that much." They walked in silence for a few blocks. The city was beginning to light up, neon signs flickering to life, car horns rising and falling in the distance. "I meant what I said back there," Morales finally offered. "You saved my brother. I owe you everything." "You don't owe me a damn thing," Marcus said. "I didn't do it for thanks." "I know," Morales replied. "That's why it matters." They reached the steps of the center. A young woman sat out front, smoking a cigarette, headphones in. When she saw Marcus, she smiled. "Morning, Sergeant," she called. He gave her a small wave. "Morning, Lexi." Morales looked around. "You live here?" Marcus nodded. "Yeah. Place for vets. Some of us get by better than others." Morales looked at the building. Chipped paint, flickering lights. "This doesn't look like getting by." Marcus gave a dry chuckle. "It's not, but it's what we got." They stood there for a moment, the December wind cutting between them. "You ever think about telling your story?" Morales asked. Marcus frowned. Why? Because people need to hear it. They need to be reminded of what sacrifice looks like. I'm no hero, Marcus muttered. I did my job. Came home. That's it. Yeah, Morales said quietly. And now you get spit on by a bus driver and sleep in a place with broken windows. That's not okay. Marcus stared at him. You think a story's gonna fix all that? Morales didn't answer right away. Then he pulled out his phone and showed Marcus the video someone had posted on social media. Him standing up on the bus. The confrontation. Marcus's quiet strength. It already had thousands of views. Marcus blinked. When did this? Just now. It's spreading fast. And it was true by morning. The video would go viral. A local news reporter would reach out. Then a national one. Then a nonprofit for veterans' rights. Then the city council. People who had passed Marcus every day without a second glance would start recognizing him, approaching him on the street with quiet apologies and gratitude. The story, carried by the current of social media and shared outrage, would stir something in people that had long been dormant: empathy. A week later, the bus driver would be suspended and required to undergo sensitivity training. But more importantly, the transit authority would issue a new protocol. Every city bus would now reserve not one but 2 front-row seats for disabled riders, including veterans, and would post visible signage to reinforce dignity and respect. A month after that, the housing center where Marcus lived would receive a surprise donation, an anonymous grant earmarked specifically for veteran housing upgrades, new heating units, better lighting, medical support. Marcus never asked who gave it. He didn't have to, but perhaps the most powerful ripple came from someone no one expected. One of the teenagers who had been on the bus that day, Jameer, a quiet kid from South City High, had recorded the video. What no one knew then was that Jameer had a father overseas, a father he hadn't heard from in months. Seeing Marcus, hearing about sacrifice, respect and silence, it stirred something in him. 2 weeks after the bus incident, Jameer submitted a speech for his school's MLK Day program. The topic: the quiet strength of a man with a cane. He read it aloud to an auditorium full of parents and peers, his voice shaking at first, then growing stronger. He spoke of judgment, of dignity, of the courage to stand, even when others sit. He ended with a quote from Marcus he'd remembered word for word. Don't apologize because I'm a vet. Apologize because I'm a human being. That should have been enough. When the crowd stood to applaud, Jameer looked down at the front row where Marcus sat beside Morales, tears in his eyes. That was the ripple. One man stood up on a bus, and the world shifted around him. The press attention faded after a few months. The city moved on to its next scandal, the next fire to put out. But some changes, quiet, enduring changes, remained. The veteran signs stayed on the buses. The front seats stayed empty, and Marcus kept walking his slow path to the stop every morning. Cane tapping on the sidewalk, the rhythm of a man who'd lived through wars both abroad and at home. But something was different now. People saw him, not as a shadow slumped in a coat, not as a problem to be moved, not as someone who didn't matter. They saw a man. An elder woman started saving a seat for him every morning. A bus driver new to the route greeted him by name and asked about his day. Teenagers who once stared blankly at their phones now nodded at him as he boarded. And Marcus, he stood straighter. It wasn't the fame, it was the recognition. The restoration of something that had been chipped away for years. His dignity. One chilly morning, as Marcus waited at the stop with a cup of gas station coffee, a familiar figure appeared beside him. Morales. No uniform today, just jeans, a jacket and a look of calm pride. Thought you'd be busy, Marcus said. I am, Morales replied. Just finished testifying before the council. Marcus raised an eyebrow. About what? Funding for transitional housing for disabled vets, Morales said. They're going to vote next week. I told them about you. About that day. I didn't ask you to do that. I know. But you changed more than one life that day. The bus hissed to a stop in front of them. As the doors opened, the driver gave a warm nod. Good morning, Mr. Taylor. Mr. Morales. As they climbed aboard, Marcus noticed something new. A poster near the front window. It read, Dignity rides here, in honor of all who served and those who stood up when it mattered most. And below that, in small font was a quote. Silence doesn't make injustice go away. Someone has to speak. A passenger. Marcus stared at it for a long moment. Then he turned and slowly made his way to his seat. Months later, Morales would go on to establish a nonprofit dedicated to veteran advocacy. It would fund legal aid, housing grants, and mentorship for former service members navigating civilian life. He'd name it the Second Salute Foundation. And the man who inspired it, Marcus Bell, not because he yelled, not because he fought, but because he stood his ground with nothing but truth, pain, and a spine that refused to bend one more inch. In his final speech before stepping down from his role as founder, Morales told a packed hall, "Dignity isn't something you can buy, legislate, or demand. You give it, you protect it. And when it's stripped from someone, especially someone who gave so much, you fight to give it back." That's what Marcus taught me. And if you ever find yourself in a moment where injustice stands tall and no one moves, be the one who stands. That's what changes the world. That same week, Marcus stood in front of South City High, invited to speak at Veterans Appreciation Day. He wore the same worn coat, the same cane in his hand, but his voice, steady and calm, carried the weight of experience. He didn't talk about medals or battles. He talked about the bus. He talked about what it means to be seen, what it means to be heard, what it means when a stranger doesn't stay silent. When he finished, a hush fell over the auditorium. Then one by one, students began to rise. Not in fanfare, in silent salute to a man who reminded them that dignity isn't a luxury. It's a birthright. Later that day, as Marcus sat on a bench outside the school, Morales joined him. "You ever think one moment on a city bus could turn into all this?" Morales asked. Marcus chuckled. "Didn't even think it was a moment. Just another day I didn't let someone push me down." Morales nodded. "Funny how those are the ones that matter most." They sat in companionable silence, two men from different wars, changed by one shared, and somewhere a city kept turning. A child was treated more kindly on a bus, a veteran stood taller in line, and a stranger stepped forward instead of turning away. All because someone once upon a cold morning decided, this is where the silence ends. This is what dignity looks like. What is lesson of this story? 1. Silence protects power, but voices ignite change. When we remain silent in the face of injustice, we give cruelty room to breathe. But one voice, no matter how soft, can shift the balance. 2. Dignity isn't earned, it's inherent. Marcus didn't need to prove his worth. No one does. Dignity belongs to every person, regardless of ability, age, or background. 3. One stand can spark a movement. Morales didn't plan to become a leader. He simply refused to let wrong go unchecked. Never underestimate the ripple effect of one courageous moment. 4. Justice is built on the shoulders of those who care. Policy changes and community shifts don't begin in courtrooms. They begin on buses, in classrooms, in everyday moments where someone says enough. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. And remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss any interesting stories from us.